The first message came in fragments, barely a whisper across the void. It wasn't sent through any official channel, no fleet relay or Empire beacon. It came from deep space, coded in a dying language, pulsing weakly through the static of a collapsing transmission array. The message was simple and terrifying. Do not go to Earth. It's a trap. Then silence. No coordinates, no sender, no explanation, just that single chilling warning that rippled through the galactic networks like wildfire. At first, the Empire laughed. They always laughed at fear. To them, Earth was a dead relic, a forgotten world that once belonged to the primitive species known as humans. A barren planet left to rot after the collapse of its atmosphere, they said. Nothing lived there anymore. No cities, no signals, no signs of life. It had been that way for centuries. Yet, the warning spread, whispered through trade lanes and pirate channels, carried by those who swore they'd seen something move near the Sol system. Something old, something watching. But arrogance was the Empire's greatest weakness. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, crushed civilizations under their banners, and rewritten the meaning of fear itself. What threat could a dead planet possibly pose to a force that spanned half the galaxy? The High Command saw opportunity where others saw danger. If there's something there, one admiral had said, we'll claim it. And if not, we'll remind the galaxy that the Empire bows to no myth. And with that, they prepared their fleet. The expedition was called Operation Eclipse, a show of power. Thousands of warships stretched across the black horizon, their hulls reflecting the light of distant stars, titans of war, armed with weapons that could level continents. To the officers and soldiers aboard, this wasn't a mission. It was a statement. The Empire feared nothing, least of all, ghosts from an extinct species. Yet, beneath all the bravado, a quiet unease lingered. No one wanted to admit it, but there was something strange about this mission. The fleet's navigators reported interference around Earth's system, distortions in the data, phantom signals echoing from nowhere. The closer they got, the more unstable their instruments became. Still, the order stood. The fleet advanced, and soon the blue marble of Earth came into view. Except, it wasn't blue anymore. It was dark, shrouded beneath swirling clouds of gray and silver. Storms covered its surface, but beneath them, faint lines of light could be seen, patterns too precise, too deliberate to be natural. The officers watched in silence, confusion flickering in their eyes. The sensors reported no energy readings, no life signs, nothing. Yet somehow, everyone could feel it. The planet was alive. Captain Irel, commander of the flagship Valor's End, stood on the bridge, staring down at the world below. A ghost world, someone muttered. No, Irel replied quietly. A graveyard. And as the words left his mouth, the first transmission came through, clear, sharp, and unmistakably human. You shouldn't have come. The bridge went silent. Every officer turned to their console, but the signal didn't originate from anywhere in the system. It seemed to come from everywhere, echoing through every frequency at once. The voice was calm, steady, but there was something cold beneath it, something ancient. The comms officer tried to respond, but before she could, the screens flickered. Static rolled through the ship, and one by one, systems began to fail. Navigation, shields, communications. Even the stars outside began to twist, as if space itself was bending around them. Then came the lights. They appeared over Earth's atmosphere, hundreds of them, rising through the clouds in formation. At first, they thought it was lightning, discharges from the storms below, but the lights moved too precisely, weaving through the sky like living things. Their sensors tried to lock onto them, but nothing registered. No heat, no radiation, just empty space. And yet, they moved with purpose. Are they drones? One officer asked. Human relics? But no one could answer. No one knew what they were seeing. The High Command demanded they press forward to send ground teams to prove that the stories of Earth were just that, stories. The Empire had conquered fear before. They would do it again. And so, drop pods began to descend, streaking through the thick atmosphere like falling stars. For a moment it seemed nothing would happen. The surface appeared barren, empty fields of ash and metal. But then, the ground itself shifted. Ruins rose from beneath the dust, glowing with faint blue veins of light. Old machines, broken towers, half-buried warships, human warships, their hulls scarred but intact, their cannons dormant. And within them, something stirred. The soldiers on the surface reported movement. Shadows in the fog, figures, tall and armored, walking through the wreckage. Their voices came through distorted, panic, confusion, disbelief. "They're human," someone whispered. "They're—" The feed cut out before the sentence finished. Back in orbit, the fleet's sensors detected something massive beneath the planet's crust. A signal pulsing deep underground, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. It was old technology, older than anything the Empire had ever encountered. Before they could react, the surface split open. A blinding surge of light erupted into space, and for the first time in history, the Empire's fleet screamed in fear. Captain Irel watched as half the formation vanished in an instant, ships swallowed by the expanding wave of energy. Alarms blared, hulls cracked, and reality itself seemed to fracture. Amid the chaos, the voice returned, stronger this time, layered with emotion. "We warned you. You should have stayed away." The survivors fled, engines burning at full capacity, but the void refused to let them go. The space around Earth bent like liquid, trapping them in orbit. And in the center of it all, a single structure emerged from the storm, a colossal station, ancient and magnificent, bearing the mark of humanity's forgotten empire. Reports from the surviving scouts suggested impossible readings, power levels beyond comprehension, technologies that shouldn't exist. Some said it was a fortress. Others whispered it was something worse, a remnant of the final human defense, a system built not to protect Earth, but to ensure no one could ever claim it again. The Empire had come to prove its strength. Instead, it had awakened something that was never meant to be disturbed, something humanity had left behind deliberately. And as the remaining ships drifted helplessly, systems dying one by one, Captain Irel saw the planet's storms part. Beneath the clouds, a symbol glowed on the surface, vast and unmistakable. It was not alien. It was human. The bridge lights flickered. The voice spoke one last time, cold and resolute. "We told you it was a trap." Then the transmission ended. The fleet hung in silence, suspended between arrogance and annihilation, as the dark side of Earth began to glow with a light no one could explain. And somewhere in that endless storm, something was waking up. The silence after the last transmission felt heavier than space itself. Captain Irel stood frozen, his eyes locked on the trembling image of Earth displayed across the bridge's main screen. Around him, the crew whispered in disbelief, their once unshakable confidence fading into quiet dread. The most powerful fleet in the galaxy, helpless, surrounded by the ruins of ships that had once represented the Empire's pride. No enemy fleet had fired upon them, no visible weapon had struck them, yet half their forces were gone, destroyed by something they didn't even understand. In the uneasy quiet that followed, the ship's systems flickered back to life, one by one. Not because the engineers fixed them, but because something else was restoring them. The control panels pulsed faintly with blue light, not the normal red of Imperial design. The engineers stared, hands trembling, afraid to touch anything. It was as if the ship itself was being rewritten, its systems speaking in a new language they didn't recognize. "Whatever this is," Irel said softly, "it's inside the ship." Far below, the drop teams that had survived the descent into Earth's atmosphere were regrouping. Their suits recorded everything: the fog, the ruins, and the strange energy patterns glowing beneath the ground. Most of them had lost communication with orbit. Static filled their comms, broken only by faint whispers, sometimes repeating their own words back to them. One squad reported finding ancient cities buried under glass and metal, their structures half melted yet humming with hidden power. Another claimed to see human figures walking through the wreckage, silhouettes that vanished when approached. Back on the Valor's end, data analysts tried to decode the signals still coming from Earth. The energy signatures were unlike anything they'd seen before, part biological, part artificial. The old archives suggested that humanity had once reached technological heights that even the Empire could not comprehend. But that was thousands of years ago, long before the Empire had unified the stars. The official record said humanity destroyed itself in a series of wars and disasters. That was the accepted truth. But if that were true, then who had sent the warning? And who, or what, was still on Earth? The Empire had always believed it was the first true galactic civilization. It had rewritten history, erased rivals, and replaced old truths with its own version of order. But some scholars had always whispered that humanity had come before. They spoke of a species that had once spanned entire clusters, that had vanished after creating something called the Sentinel Network, a defense system so advanced that even gods would fear to awaken it. Those were myths, of course, until now. Captain Irel ordered a full scan of the planet, despite the risk. The technicians obeyed, sending deep-range pulses through the atmosphere. The readings that returned made no sense. There were vast underground structures, cities stretching across continents, power grids still active, and something enormous beneath the crust. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense, but the energy readings from it were off the scale. The core of the planet itself seemed to be alive. "It's like the planet is responding," one officer said quietly, "as if it knows we're here." The moment they completed the scan, the power aboard the flagship surged again. Every light dimmed. The ship's AI system rebooted, displaying words none of the crew had written. Access denied. Human priority override engaged. A chill spread through the command deck. The Empire had strict control over all artificial systems. No override codes existed outside their command structure. Yet here was a code older and stronger, bypassing everything as though the Empire's technology were nothing more than a child's toy. Then the ship's intercom crackled. A voice spoke, familiar yet impossible. "This vessel belongs to humanity." It was clear, calm, and cold. "You have trespassed where you were forbidden to go." The sound came not from any channel, but from within the ship's own systems. The engineers tried to shut it down, but the controls no longer responded. The voice continued. "Leave while you can. Those who stay will be erased." Panic spread through the fleet. Some captains tried to flee, ordering their ships into jump sequence, but the moment they activated their drives, they vanished from all sensors. No explosion, no trace, just gone. The remaining ships powered down their engines in fear, unwilling to risk it. The space around Earth had become a cage. Irel stood at the center of it all, watching his command unravel. He wasn't a man who believed in myths. He believed in strength, order, and logic. But this was something different. Something beyond strength. He thought of the warnings, of the ghostly voice that had spoken before they arrived. What if this wasn't just a remnant of human technology? What if humanity had never died out at all? A transmission broke through the interference again, this time from the surface. It was one of the ground teams. The soldier's face was pale, eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain, you need to see this." The image flickered, stabilizing just enough to reveal a colossal structure rising from the fog. It wasn't alien. It was unmistakably human in design. Massive towers of black steel and silver alloy arranged in perfect symmetry. Across its surface were markings that matched the ones glowing on the planet's surface. "We found a command hub," the soldier said, his voice shaking. "But it's active. It's waiting for something." Before they could ask what, the feed cut out. The storm above the planet intensified, lightning flashing in unnatural patterns, straight lines, geometric shapes, circles overlapping in the clouds. The ship's systems translated them automatically. Words, a message. Final protocol engaged. The officers on the bridge exchanged uneasy glances. No one knew what that meant. Irel ordered the fleet into defensive formation, but their ships were sluggish, their systems increasingly unresponsive. "Something's rewriting our code," one technician said, panic creeping into his tone. "It's changing everything, our shields, our weapons, like it's taking control." Irel turned toward the viewport. The planet below was glowing brighter now, the lines of light converging at a single point in the northern hemisphere. From that point something was rising, a construct of light and shadow, immense in scale, forming a ring that expanded outward like a halo. Space itself trembled as the energy built, and the readings climbed far beyond measurable limits. "What is that?" an officer whispered. Irel didn't answer. He could feel it now, not fear exactly, but the sense of standing before something vast and ancient, something not meant to be touched. The legends had called it the human bastion, the final defense humanity built before they disappeared. It was said to guard not the planet, but the truth buried beneath it. The fleet's sensors detected movement again, hundreds of smaller contacts launching from the planet's surface. Drones, ships, machines, no one could tell. They moved with precision and purpose, surrounding the Imperial fleet without firing a single shot. They didn't need to. Every ship caught in their formation lost power immediately, their systems flickering out like candles. A new voice filled the air, different from before, softer, almost mournful. "You were warned," it said. "We left this place behind so the galaxy could live. You have awoken what we sealed away." The transmission ended, leaving only the hum of failing engines and the quiet, rhythmic pulse from the planet below. The Empire's arrogance had led them here, to a place where even legends feared to look. Captain Irel looked out at the glowing Earth, its surface alive with energy. He thought about the humans who once lived there, what they had built, and why they had vanished. Maybe they hadn't vanished at all. Maybe they had become something else. The lights on the bridge dimmed again, and for a brief moment the reflection on the viewport showed something that made Irel's breath catch. A face staring back at him. Human. Cold. Watching. And then it was gone. Outside, the great ring of light continued to expand, growing brighter with every passing second, its silent rhythm echoing across the stars. The fleet hung trapped within it, powerless, waiting for whatever would come next. And in that frozen moment, as the void trembled, one thought echoed in every mind aboard the ships. Earth was never abandoned. It was waiting. The fleet drifted in silent orbit, trapped between fear and disbelief. What had once been the most powerful armada in the galaxy now hung powerless, surrounded by something they couldn't fight or even understand. The ring of light around Earth pulsed slowly, like a living thing, its rhythm echoing through the void. Every pulse sent a faint vibration through the ships, not strong enough to damage them, but enough to make the crew feel it deep in their bones, like a heartbeat. The engineers said it wasn't a weapon, but no one believed them. Captain Irel stood on the bridge of the Valor's End, watching as his officers argued quietly. Some wanted to flee, to risk the jump drives despite the danger. Others insisted they stay and find answers. No one agreed on what to do next, and for the first time in his career, Irel had no clear orders. The Empire's command network had gone silent. Every channel leading back to Imperial space was dead. They were completely cut off. He stared at the holographic map of the system, watching the faint signatures of the remaining ships flicker and fade. The drones or machines whatever they were, still surrounded them. They didn't attack, didn't move closer, but they never left. It was like they were waiting for something, waiting for a signal, waiting for them to make a mistake. In the lower decks of the ship, fear had turned into whispers. Some of the crew believed the humans had returned, that this was their revenge for being forgotten by history. Others believed it wasn't humans at all, but something they had created, something they lost control of long ago. The younger officers tried to stay calm, but the veterans knew what it meant when even the machines refused to obey. Meanwhile, far below, on Earth's surface, the surviving ground teams were discovering that the planet was not as lifeless as it looked. Sergeant Terran's squad had taken shelter inside the remains of what appeared to be a massive underground city. The architecture was unmistakably human. Clean lines, metal corridors, and signs written in an ancient language that none of their translators could decode. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became. The city was still powered by something. One of the soldiers found a console still glowing faintly. When they touched it, the lights around them flickered, and a soft voice echoed through the hall. It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. "Unauthorized access detected," it said. "State your designation." No one dared answer. The system paused, then continued. "Biometric scan complete. Species, non-human. Access restricted." The doors around them sealed shut. Terran tried to contact orbit, but the signal wouldn't reach. The air began to hum, low and steady, and the soldiers raised their weapons. From the shadows at the far end of the corridor, a faint blue light appeared, shifting, human-shaped, but transparent. A hologram, perhaps, or something more. "You shouldn't be here," it said. Its voice was gentle, almost sorrowful. "This place isn't meant for you." Then it vanished, leaving only silence. Back on the Valor's end, Irel's engineers were trying to analyze the data from the planet's surface. What they found only deepened the mystery. The energy signatures didn't match any known technology. It wasn't mechanical, biological, or artificial. It was something in between. The readings showed that the planet was generating enormous amounts of controlled energy, but not for destruction. It was like Earth itself was maintaining balance, regulating every pulse, every storm. "It's almost like it's protecting something," the science officer murmured. That same night cycle, one of the smaller ships in orbit, the Eclipse Wing, went dark. No distress call, no explosion, just gone. Irel ordered reconnaissance drones to investigate, but when the feed came through, it showed something chilling. The ship wasn't destroyed, it was empty. The hull floated intact, every system functional, but not a single life sign remained aboard. Tools were still on the floor, meals half-eaten. Even the ship's log ended mid-sentence. Whatever had happened, it took everyone silently. Rumors spread fast. Some said the humans had taken them. Others said the ship had been absorbed by whatever controlled the energy field around Earth. Irel refused to believe either theory, but deep down, even he could feel it. Something was watching them. Days passed, or maybe hours. It was hard to tell with the interference. The fleet's internal clocks were no longer in sync. Some showed different dates entirely, as if time itself was shifting. Then, without warning, the Valor's End received a new transmission. It wasn't a voice this time, but an image. A planet-sized structure, buried deep beneath Earth's surface. It resembled a heart, massive, pulsing with energy. The transmission came with a message, encoded in old Terran script. The ship's translator struggled to interpret it, but a fragment came through. Containment breach imminent. Protocol 7 in effect. No one understood what it meant, but the captain knew one thing. It wasn't good. If this was a warning, it meant something was waking up, just as the earlier messages had suggested. He ordered all remaining ships to pull back, but before the maneuver could begin, the fleet was engulfed in a wave of static. The stars outside twisted again, and for a split second, Errol saw something impossible. Dozens of ghostly shapes drifting through space, outlines of ships that no longer existed. Human ships, ancient and rusted, moving through the void like memories refusing to die. The phenomenon passed, leaving the fleet shaken. One officer swore he saw faces in the static, human faces, watching them from the other side of the glass. "They're not gone," he whispered. "They're still here, just different." Errol dismissed it, but part of him wondered if the man was right. What if humanity hadn't died? What if they had evolved beyond physical form, beyond time itself, becoming something tied to the planet in ways the Empire couldn't comprehend? Elsewhere in the fleet, smaller conflicts began to erupt. Some officers wanted to surrender control of their ships to the strange force, believing it might spare them. Others demanded they prepare for battle, convinced that humanity's remnants were preparing an attack. The tension grew with each passing hour as paranoia and fear began to replace discipline. In the darkness below, Sergeant Terran's team made another discovery. Beneath the ruins, they found what looked like a cryogenic chamber, rows upon rows of capsules stretching as far as they could see. Inside some of them, faint shadows moved, but the frost made it impossible to tell what they were. One capsule near the front was active, its screen blinking with a single word: reawakening. The team tried to open it, but the system locked them out, flashing warnings in old Earth symbols. The voice returned, softer this time, almost pleading. "Do not interfere. They are not ready." The temperature in the chamber began to rise, the ice melting slowly, revealing shapes inside, humanoid, but not quite human. Before they could react, the floor trembled, and the feed to orbit went black again. Above, the energy field around Earth began to expand once more. The fleet's sensors recorded power levels higher than before, spreading outward across the system. But this time, it wasn't just defensive. It was reaching for them. The drones surrounding the fleet began to move, forming new patterns, shifting into what looked like constellations. Then a new signal appeared, echoing through every ship at once. "Humanity's return was never meant to be seen. You have awakened the sleeper core. Leave now before the final gate opens." But they couldn't leave. The jump drives were dead, their engines offline. The Empire's might had become its prison. And as the message faded, the planet below pulsed once more, the light spreading until it reached the fleet, wrapping them in its glow. In that moment, Captain Errol realized the truth that the galaxy had long forgotten. Earth wasn't abandoned. It was guarding something so dangerous that even its own creators had buried it deep and sealed it away. And now, because of their arrogance, that seal was breaking. As the light consumed the void, one thought echoed through every ship, every terrified mind. Whatever was beneath Earth's surface wasn't just waking up. It was remembering. The storm over Earth had become more than just weather. It was alive. From orbit, the fleet watched lightning tear across the surface in perfect geometric patterns, each flash synchronized with the growing pulse beneath the planet. The air itself seemed to hum, vibrating through the ship's hulls as if the entire solar system had become one vast engine preparing to ignite. Every ship's sensors overloaded, flooding the screens with unreadable data. No matter how the engineers tried to stabilize the systems, something kept rewriting their code, stripping away control one piece at a time. Captain Errol stood on the bridge of the Valor's End, his hands gripping the railing so tightly that the metal creaked under the pressure. Around him, his officers were shouting over alarms, but the captain barely heard them. His focus was locked on the planet below, on the faint glow spreading like veins of fire across Earth's continents. The lights formed patterns, spiraling inward toward a single point in the northern hemisphere. Whatever lay beneath that region, it was waking up. Then came the voice again. Calm, human, echoing through every comm channel in the fleet. "You were told not to come. The seal cannot hold if you remain." The tone wasn't angry or vengeful. It sounded tired, like someone speaking from across centuries, burdened by what they knew would happen. Irel tried to respond, but his words died as the bridge lights dimmed and the ship's AI activated on its own. The display filled with lines of old Terran code. A new message appeared, burning in bright red text. Sentinel Network Reactivation, Stage 2. Down on Earth's surface, Sergeant Terran's squad was running for their lives. The underground chamber had begun to collapse, the ground shaking with a force that felt like the heartbeat of a god. The cryogenic pods were shattering one by one, releasing waves of mist that glowed faintly blue. The air crackled with static, and for the briefest moment, Terran saw movement inside the fog, human shapes, tall and armored, eyes glowing with faint light. They didn't move toward the soldiers. They simply turned their heads upward, toward the ceiling, as if listening to something calling them from above. One of Terran's soldiers tried to film it, but their cameras failed instantly, every piece of tech overloaded. "They're waking up!" someone shouted. "We need to get out of here!" But the exits were gone, sealed by layers of shifting metal. The ground trembled again, and through the cracks above, a beam of white light cut down into the chamber, surrounding the figures in the mist. The energy didn't harm them, it absorbed into their armor. One by one, they lifted their heads, and the sound that followed wasn't human. It was a deep, mechanical hum that echoed through the earth. Up in orbit, the fleet's scanners registered enormous energy surges coming from multiple points on the surface. "Captain, the entire planet's power grid is reactivating," said the science officer, his voice shaking. "This isn't a natural defense. It's coordinated." The captain frowned. "Coordinated by what?" The officer hesitated before answering. "By someone, or something that's been waiting for us." Before he could reply, a nearby ship, a heavy cruiser called the Solar Rain, was hit by an invisible wave. The entire vessel went dark, drifting aimlessly as its lights flickered out. Moments later, its hull began to change. The metallic plating twisted, reshaping itself as if guided by unseen hands. The ship's design was shifting, its imperial symbols vanishing beneath layers of new metal. Then, the impossible happened. The ship turned back toward the fleet and powered up again, but its weapons were no longer imperial. It had been rewritten. The crew of the Valor's End watched in horror as the Solar Rain opened fire. Not at Earth, but at them. The beams weren't plasma or ion, they were pure energy, cutting through space like sunlight through glass. The first shot grazed a destroyer, slicing through its shields and hull effortlessly. "It's using human tech," the weapons officer shouted. "They've taken control of our ships." Panic spread through the fleet as more vessels began to twist and change, their systems hijacked one by one. Within minutes, half of the Imperial Armada had turned against its own. Irel ordered his fleet to fall back, but the jump drives still refused to activate. The energy field around Earth was tightening, pulling everything closer. It was no longer just a trap, it was a cage. "We're being drawn in," said the navigator. "It's pulling us toward the planet." Irel turned toward the viewport, watching as the ring of light expanded again, reaching up to meet them. "Brace for impact!" he shouted. The ship shook violently as gravitational forces seized it. Outside, debris from the ruined fleet spiraled downward, glowing as it burned in the atmosphere. For a few moments, the stars vanished, replaced by clouds and storms. The Valor's End broke through, descending into the chaos. Below them, they could see massive towers rising from the ground, structures that hadn't existed minutes ago. They were forming out of the landscape itself, assembling like machinery coming to life. Through the static, a signal broke through, Sergeant Terran's voice. "This is Ground Team Delta. We found survivors. I think they're human." The channel filled with interference, but fragments of the transmission came through. "They said it's not an attack. It's containment." Then silence. Containment. The word struck Irel harder than any weapon could. Humanity hadn't destroyed itself. They'd built something so dangerous that they had to lock it away, even from themselves. And now, the Empire's arrogance had broken the lock. Suddenly, the light outside the ship dimmed. The clouds parted, revealing the northern pole. At the center of a vast storm stood a single structure that pierced the atmosphere, a tower of black metal and white light, stretching from the ground to the edge of space. It pulsed in rhythm with the ring that had trapped them. "We're reading massive power flow from that tower," the science officer said. "It's connecting to everything on the planet. It's controlling the field." Irel hesitated, torn between curiosity and survival. "Prepare a landing team," he ordered. "We're going down there." The shuttle descended through the lightning-filled sky, shaking violently as turbulence tore at its hull. Below, the surface looked like a battlefield, ruins, flames, and endless waves of energy sweeping across the ground. When they landed, the ground trembled beneath their boots. The tower was close, its surface covered in glowing symbols that shifted and rearranged like living circuits. At its base, they found a massive door, half open, as if something had forced its way out. Inside, they could see the faint outline of a chamber filled with ancient machines. And in the center, a single humanoid figure stood motionless, encased in armor that shimmered with light. It looked human, but its eyes were pure white. One of the soldiers raised his weapon, but Irel stopped him. The figure moved slightly, turning its head toward them. Then, for the first time, it spoke. "You woke us too soon." Its voice was deep, resonant, layered with echoes, as though thousands spoke through one. The seal was never meant to be broken. "Who are you?" Irel demanded, his voice steady but his heart pounding. The figure stepped forward, light cascading off its armor. "We were the Guardians," it said. "We were left behind to protect what sleeps beneath. But now the sleepers stir, and the stars will remember fear." Before Irel could ask what it meant, the ground shook violently. The tower flared with light, and the figure's gaze turned skyward. Through the clouds, they could see the Valor's end being pulled downward, dragged toward the storm. The fleet above was breaking apart, ships colliding and vanishing in blinding flashes. The figure's voice rose, echoing through the ruins. "You have brought the end closer. It will wake now, and none of us can stop it." Lightning struck the tower, the blast so bright it blinded everyone for a moment. When Irel opened his eyes again, the figure was gone. Only the sound of the storm remained, and a deep, low rumble rising from far beneath the earth, like the sound of something ancient turning in its sleep. The ground split open, revealing light so bright it swallowed the horizon. The energy readings spiked off the charts. "Captain!" the comm officer shouted through the static. "It's coming from the core! Whatever it is, it's waking up!" And as the last of the fleet burned in the sky, Captain Irel realized that the Empire hadn't just found a forgotten world. They had awoken something that should have stayed buried forever. The storm reached its peak. The tower screamed with light. And from beneath the surface of Earth, something vast began to rise. The ground tore open like the planet itself was alive, light bursting from the fissures and shooting into the storm above. The sky changed color, shifting between blue, gold, and deep crimson, as if time and atmosphere were folding together. Captain Irel stumbled backward, shielding his eyes as the roar of the quake drowned out every sound. Around him, the air shimmered, heavy with static and heat. The soldiers shouted to one another, their voices lost in the chaos. Somewhere beyond the blinding glow, something was rising from the earth, a shape too vast to fully comprehend. The light dimmed just enough for Irel to see the outline of it. It wasn't a weapon or a structure. It was alive. A colossal form, metal fused with bone, ancient machinery intertwined with what looked like veins of pulsing energy. Its eyes opened slowly, flooding the landscape in white light. For the first time, the sensors registered a signal, massive, incomprehensible, and yet unmistakably human in origin. "It's broadcasting," one of Irel's officers shouted over the comms. It's identifying itself." The message came through distorted, layered with echoes, but the translation was chilling. Sentinel Prime, humanity's final protocol. Irel's breath caught. Humanity hadn't just built weapons, they had built gods, sentient guardians left behind not to defend Earth, but to contain something worse. The tower they had approached wasn't a prison, it was a key, and now it had been turned. From orbit, the remnants of the Imperial fleet could only watch. The Valor's End hung in low atmosphere, systems failing one by one. The surviving officers on the bridge were speechless as they saw the storm twist upward into a massive vortex, connecting the planet to space. The energy readings went off the charts, strong enough to warp gravity itself. Some of the smaller ships began to drift toward it, pulled into the spiral like leaves caught in a flood. On the surface, Irel's team took cover as the ground beneath them started to rise. The Sentinel's colossal body was reshaping the terrain, forming new structures around it. Then, to their horror, something else began to emerge from the same fissure. It was darker, heavier, and its energy signature didn't match the Sentinel's. Whatever it was, the Sentinel had not awakened alone. A deep voice echoed through the air, so low it vibrated in their bones. It didn't come from the Sentinel. It came from beneath it. "Containment compromised. Entity release imminent." The words repeated in old Terran dialect, over and over. The soldiers looked to Irel for orders, but he was frozen, staring at the light spreading beneath the Sentinel's feet. "What entity?" one of them whispered. Suddenly, the Sentinel turned its head, not toward them, but toward the sky. Its voice thundered through the comm systems of every ship, every channel, every frequency. "Unauthorized vessels detected. Empire designation, hostile." Its eyes flared brighter, and beams of light shot into orbit. In seconds, half the remaining Imperial fleet was obliterated, their ships dissolving into fragments of molten metal. The shockwave hit the Valor's End, sending it spiraling into a failing orbit. In the chaos, one of the science officers managed to decipher the data the Sentinel was transmitting. "Captain, it's not just attacking us," she said, her voice trembling. "It's activating something inside the planet's core. There's a network, some kind of system connecting every part of the crust. Whatever's below it, it's bigger than the Sentinel." The ground split further, and a second light erupted, this one red, pulsing faster and faster, spreading through the clouds like veins of fire. The Sentinel turned toward it, its voice suddenly strained, almost fearful. "Containment breach confirmed. The Abyssal Protocol is active." Then it moved, massive, unstoppable, each step shaking the earth. Irel shouted for his soldiers to fall back, but the energy in the air was already distorting everything. Gravity shifted in unpredictable waves. Dust and debris floated upward, as if reality itself was breaking apart. In the distance, the horizon bent upward like the curve of a wave, swallowing the sky. Then, for a split second, Irel saw it, another figure rising beneath the earth, darker and more massive than the Sentinel. It wasn't made of metal, but of something older, almost organic, pulsing with red energy that radiated hunger. The sensors went wild. The data was impossible to interpret, but the readings all said one thing. The energy coming from that thing was stronger than the entire planet's core. Whatever humanity had sealed away, it wasn't a weapon. It was something they couldn't destroy, something that could consume entire worlds. The Sentinel roared, a sound that wasn't mechanical but alive, filled with pain and fury. It struck the ground with a shockwave that shattered everything around it. Massive blue energy surged upward, clashing against the red wave rising from below. The two forces collided, lighting the sky like a second sun. For a moment, day and night existed together, and then the air exploded with light and sound. Back in orbit, the Valor's End was barely holding together. The crew watched the battle unfold through the storm, their screens filled with static and blinding flashes. "Captain, we're picking up life signs. Thousands of them," said the comms officer. "They're human, but not like us. It's like they've been sleeping under the surface all this time." The realization hit Irel with the weight of a world. Humanity hadn't died out. They had buried themselves. They had sealed their planet not as a tomb, but as a fortress. The Sentinels were their guardians, their protectors, and possibly their wardens. And now, by breaking through their defenses, the Empire had awoken not only the protectors, but the threat they had been holding back. The red light expanded across the planet's surface, spreading through oceans, mountains, and cities. Wherever it touched, the ground decayed, transforming into black glass. The Sentinels' blue light fought to contain it, but the corruption spread faster. In the sky, the clouds twisted into spirals, opening into a vast rift that glowed from within. Through the storm, a new transmission came through the comms. Faint, broken, but undeniably human. "This is Commander Hale of the Terran Bastion. If you can hear this, humanity still stands. The breach must not reach the core. If it does, everything ends." The officers exchanged shocked glances. The name matched no Imperial records. Hale shouldn't exist, yet the transmission was real. Somewhere beneath the planet, humans were alive and fighting. Irel opened a channel, shouting into the storm. "This is Captain Irel of the Empire. We didn't come to destroy, we came to learn. Tell us how to stop this." The reply came faintly, drowned by static. "You can't stop it. Only we can. But you can help by surviving long enough to warn the stars." The transmission ended as suddenly as it had begun. Then, the surface erupted. The red force broke free from beneath the Sentinel's grasp, tearing upward in a pillar of energy that reached space. The rift above Earth widened, showing glimpses of something vast beyond, a structure or being made of light and shadow, its presence pressing against reality. The fleet's systems failed instantly. Gravity distorted. For a brief moment, the entire planet seemed to hang still, silent. Then, a single word echoed across every frequency, every channel, every ship. A word that froze every living soul in the fleet. Awakening. The storm roared back to life, stronger than before. The Sentinel turned its gaze upward, its body breaking apart under the pressure. The red light swallowed half the horizon, devouring everything in its path. Irel stared, realizing too late what the humans had done. They hadn't created the Sentinels to protect themselves. They had created them to delay the inevitable. Whatever was beneath Earth wasn't meant to stay buried forever. It was waiting for a reason to return. And now, because of the Empire's arrogance, that reason had come. The storm consumed the sky. The Sentinel fell to one knee, its energy fading as the red force surged higher, reaching for the stars. Irel's comm crackled one last time with a faint, human voice, filled with fear and awe. "It's not a weapon," it said. "It's a memory, and it remembers everything." Then the signal died, leaving only the sound of the storm and the rising light of something ancient reclaiming its world. The storm tore the sky apart. Blue and red light clashed like two oceans colliding in space, lightning striking from orbit all the way to the surface. The Empire's fleet was in chaos, drifting in fractured formations as the gravity pulses twisted their trajectories. On the ground, Captain Irel and his surviving squad huddled behind a half-collapsed ridge, their suits flickering from energy surges. The Sentinel, the massive, godlike machine, was falling apart, its core glowing with unstable light as it struggled to contain the red force rising from beneath the planet. The air trembled with every heartbeat. Irel could hear the voice again. It wasn't over the comms now, it was inside his head. A calm, human tone buried under layers of static. "Do not run. The choice must be made." He turned toward the Sentinel, watching its eyes dim and reignite in irregular pulses. "You're still conscious?" he shouted. "Then tell us what we're dealing with." The voice replied through the storm, no longer just a sound but a feeling that shook the ground around him. "Containment was never destruction. Humanity did not win. We endured. The abyssal entity was born from us." The words froze Irel in place. "Born from us?" The thought made his pulse quicken. He stared at the red light spreading across the land, realizing it wasn't just energy. It was alive. The shapes moving inside the light were human silhouettes, distorted, merging and splitting, as if memories themselves were struggling to take form. "It's made of people," whispered one of the soldiers, her voice breaking. "It's all of them. Everyone who lived here before." Above them, the sentinel raised one colossal hand and plunged it into the rising red energy. The resulting shockwave flattened mountains and split the air with sound that felt like the world crying out. For a moment, it seemed as if the machine was winning. The red glow flickered, recoiling as the sentinel's core burned brighter. But then the impossible happened. The red energy shifted, curling upward, forming a massive humanoid figure of its own. Shapeless at first, then terrifyingly defined. Its face was featureless, yet Irel felt it looking straight at him, through him, past everything he understood. The Imperial fleet, still barely functional in orbit, detected a sudden spike of gravitational distortion. The readings were off the charts. "Captain!" a comms officer screamed from the Valor's end. "It's using the planet's magnetic field to power itself. It's feeding on the core." The realization hit like a hammer. If the entity consumed Earth's energy, it wouldn't stop there. It would keep spreading, planet to planet, system to system. The Sentinel's voice echoed again, weaker now, but still defiant. "You cannot destroy what was born from memory, but you can choose what remains." Its chest opened, revealing a massive, glowing sphere, its heart, the last stable energy source on the planet. Irel understood then what it wanted. "You're going to burn yourself out," he said quietly. "You're going to take it with you." The Sentinel didn't answer. Instead, a flood of images filled Irel's mind, glimpses of Earth before it fell, of humans standing side by side as the skies burned, of laughter and pain and unity. Humanity hadn't built these machines to dominate, they had built them to remember, to carry who they were when everything else was gone. The red figure raised its arm, hurling a wave of energy that split the clouds apart. The Sentinel countered, driving its hand deep into the beam and forcing it back inch by inch. Irel and his team could barely hold their footing as the ground melted beneath them. "Fall back!" he shouted, but there was nowhere left to go. The planet itself was unraveling. Then a signal came through the storm, clear, strong, unmistakably human. "This is Commander Hale of the Terran Bastion. Sentinel-1, authorization code, Echelon Omega." The Sentinel froze for a split second, then bowed its head. A human voice echoed through it, carried by the machine's dying systems. "Acknowledged." The voice was Hale's, but it wasn't just hers. It was many voices together, layered as though thousands were speaking as one. A new light appeared far to the west, golden this time, cutting through the red storm. More sentinels rising from the depths, their forms cracked and ancient, but still standing. "Multiple awakenings," said one of Irel's soldiers, her voice trembling. "They're everywhere." One by one, the sentinels activated, their blue cores igniting, forming a defensive circle around the planet's most unstable point, the place where the red entity's body connected to the surface. The ground heaved as the sentinels released their combined energy, forming a massive containment barrier. The red entity shrieked, its voice shaking the air as it was forced inward, compressed against the light. The sky burned white, the planet roared. And then, silence. For a moment, Irel thought it was over. The air was still, the ground no longer shifting. The sentinels stood motionless, their lights fading. The storm above began to clear, revealing stars beyond the ruined atmosphere. But the peace didn't last. A pulse of energy surged through the ground, faint, almost like a heartbeat. The red glow returned, weaker but concentrated in one spot. The fissures around it sealed, locking it deep beneath the earth again. The containment had been restored, at a cost. The surviving sentinels dimmed completely, their forms sinking back into the crust. The energy readings dropped to 0. Everything seemed quiet. Iril removed his helmet, taking his first breath of unfiltered air in what felt like years. It was thin, burned, but breathable. "We made it," whispered one of his soldiers. "The planet's still alive." From orbit, the Valor's End confirmed the readings. The energy storm had dissipated, and the gravitational field was stabilizing. The red entity was no longer spreading. For the first time, Earth was calm. Then, through the comms, Hale's voice returned, faint, distant, but clear. Containment restored. Humanity's memory endures. Irel smiled weakly, feeling the weight of everything settle in. But before he could reply, Hale continued. "However, the cycle has shifted. The Empire's interference changed the pattern. You've awakened something outside the system." Irel's stomach dropped. "Outside the system? What do you mean?" Static filled the line, and then one last fragment came through. "They heard it. The stars. They heard it too." In orbit, deep-range scanners started picking up new signals, faint but growing stronger. Dozens of them, hundreds. Unknown ships entering the system, drawn by the pulse that had shaken the void. Their configurations didn't match anything in Imperial records nor any known civilization. The silence of space was breaking, and something vast was answering the call. On the surface, Irel looked to the sky, seeing streaks of light far above. "We stopped one war," he said softly, "and started another." The wind howled across the scorched land, carrying the faint echo of voices, old, human, and sorrowful. The red glow beneath the ground pulsed once more, like a reminder that the story wasn't over. As the stars shimmered with approaching vessels, the last sentinel opened its eye one final time, its fading voice drifting across every remaining comm channel. "They warned you not to come to Earth, and they were right. The trap was never for you. It was for what followed." The transmission ended. The planet fell silent again, caught between rebirth and ruin. In the stillness, Captain Irel realized the truth. Humanity hadn't vanished. They had prepared the galaxy for what came next. The warning had been clear all along. Earth wasn't just a world. It was the last door keeping something far worse from getting out. And now, that door had been opened. The light of dawn broke over a wounded Earth. The storm clouds had finally cleared, revealing a quiet sky that looked almost gentle after the chaos. The world was scarred. Craters where forests once stood, seas turned into shimmering plains of glass. But it was still there, alive. The silence that followed was strange, almost fragile, as if the planet itself was holding its breath, unsure if it should be grateful or afraid. Captain Irel stood among the ruins of what had been the Imperial outpost. His armor was cracked, his visor dark with dust, but he was breathing, and that was enough. Around him, the few surviving soldiers moved slowly, dazed, helping one another to stand. The horizon was lined with the faint glow of cooling metal, remnants of the sentinels that had sacrificed themselves to seal the threat once more. Their silhouettes looked like fallen giants, resting at last after an endless watch. Irel's comm crackled weakly. "Captain, the Valor's End is stabilizing orbit. They're bringing survivors aboard. Evac zones are being marked." The voice of the comm officer sounded tired, almost hollow. The man paused before adding, "There's no more interference from the surface. The red energy is gone." Irel looked down at the cracked ground beneath his boots, faint traces of heat still rising from the fissures. "Gone," he repeated softly, though he didn't quite believe it. Nothing that powerful ever really disappeared. It slept. It waited. He thought back to the voice he'd heard in the storm, the warning about the stars. If that was true, then this was just one battle in a much larger war humanity had already fought once before. The wind blew through the ruins, carrying the smell of ash and ozone. In the distance, the faint hum of the Sentinel's remains echoed through the land, like a heartbeat fading away. Irel turned to his second-in-command, who was staring at one of the fallen machines. "They were protecting this planet even after all this time," she said quietly. "They weren't our enemies." "No," Irel replied. "They were our teachers. We just didn't understand the lesson." He walked closer to one of the ruined sentinels, its massive hand half buried in the dirt. Its metallic surface was covered with old inscriptions, symbols that looked human, but worn by time. As he traced them with his gloved fingers, his visor's translator flickered, trying to decode the ancient writing. A few words appeared on the display, faint but clear enough to read, "Memory is not the past. It is the defense of the future." For a long moment, Irel said nothing. The Empire had come to Earth to conquer, to claim what they thought was an abandoned relic of an extinct species, but instead they had found proof that humanity was far from gone, and that their legacy was built on sacrifice, not dominance. He wondered what kind of people had once walked this ground, strong enough to face something that could devour worlds, yet wise enough to lock it away instead of using it. A sudden flash of light drew his attention skyward. The Valor's End was descending, engines burning bright against the dawn. Drop pods followed, streaking through the air, bringing med teams and recovery drones. The survivors gathered what equipment they could and prepared to leave the surface. As Irel looked at the planet one last time, he couldn't shake the feeling that leaving it behind meant abandoning something sacred. When the evacuation shuttle lifted off, the sight of Earth from above was breathtaking. Vast scars crisscrossed the continents, glowing faintly where energy still lingered. Yet among those scars were patches of green, stubborn traces of life pushing through the cracks. It was as if the planet itself refused to die, no matter how many times it was burned. Back aboard the Valor's End, the atmosphere was heavy with exhaustion. The surviving officers gathered around the main display as data streamed in from the surface. "Containment field stable," one of the technicians reported. "No residual energy spikes. The Sentinel network is offline. Permanently." Another officer looked up. "But we picked up something else, a faint beacon under the planet's crust. It's transmitting an old Terran signal, automated." Irel leaned forward. "What kind of signal?" "Distress and coordinates. Not from this system. It's pointing outward, toward the galactic rim." A long silence followed. They all knew what it meant. The moment Earth's defenses had awakened, the signal had gone out, an echo from the past calling to whoever might still be listening. Commander Hale's last words came back to Irel like an echo. They heard it too. The bridge was quiet, except for the low hum of the engines. "We can't stay," Irel said finally. "If those signals are spreading, someone or something will come looking. We need to warn the Empire." "And what then?" asked his second-in-command softly. "Do we tell them we found a sleeping god under Earth? That humanity wasn't destroyed, but waiting? They won't believe us." "They'll believe when they see the stars change," Irel said. His voice was calm but steady. "Earth isn't a graveyard. It's a message. Maybe it was always meant to be." Hours later, as the Valor's End prepared for departure, Irel stood by the viewport, watching the planet slowly shrink beneath them. The blue light from the atmosphere glowed faintly around its edges, almost peaceful now. But he could still see faint trails in the distance, tiny red threads of energy coiling just beneath the clouds, like veins that refused to fade. He thought about the first message they had ignored. The warnings carved in alien script across the stars. "Do not go to Earth. It is a trap." The Empire had seen arrogance as strength, caution as weakness. They came for conquest and nearly unleashed extinction. But perhaps that was the trap all along. Not the planet, but the pride that blinded them. When the ship finally broke free of orbit, the comms flickered one last time. It was a faint signal, almost lost in static. A human voice, soft and distant. For those who remember, thank you. The bridge fell silent as the message faded into the void. No one spoke, but they all felt the same quiet chill. It wasn't a threat. It was gratitude, from the remnants of a civilization that had once held the galaxy together. As the Valor's end entered faster than light speed, Irel closed his eyes, the image of Earth burning into his mind. Humanity had left behind more than machines or ruins. They had left behind their will to endure, a warning and a promise wrapped into one. The Empire could choose to learn from it or repeat the same mistakes that had nearly ended everything. In the silence of the command deck, the stars stretched into long streams of light. Irel whispered to himself, "Maybe we weren't meant to rule the galaxy. Maybe we were meant to remember it." And far behind them, unseen in the dark, Earth pulsed once, just once, with a faint red glow from deep beneath its surface. The containment field held, but deep inside, something stirred like a slow breath. The entity slept again, buried under layers of ancient code and steel. Yet for the first time in eons, its whisper was no longer filled with rage. It sounded almost human. The universe was quiet once more, but only for now. The message from Earth still traveled outward, a ripple through the void, carrying with it a story of warning and hope. Someday others would hear it. And when they did, they would remember. The ones who came before had not fallen. They had fought for the stars themselves. And even in silence, humanity still spoke.